And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman. I'm here actually in my home studio in Miami, Florida. And before the camera pans over, it's just we have a guest that it's so exciting. We usually cover politics here. We have senators, congresspeople. You guys have been listening and watching. We had the incredible opportunity to invite with us the man sitting to my right, Academy Award winning actor John Voight. John, Mr. Voight, has been a friend of the family for some years, due mostly to his support for the Jewish people in Israel, but you interact with him and his energy is just contagious. If I have to tell you his bio and who he is, you might have been living under a rock since 1960, which is when he began his career first in theater in New York, and before he made his way over to Hollywood. It's over 5 decades. And John, first, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored.
It's my pleasure, Gabe.
You know, there's so much happening in Hollywood and so much to talk about. We started a little bit yesterday, and the biggest thing when I think of Hollywood is that it's empty. It's like a vacuous thing, which, you know, produces so much beauty and art and culture, but it's been missing so much for so many years. You're the antithesis of that. You're someone who also uses your fame and your platform to push so many great things. But before we get into that, you know, I'd love to ask, we were thinking about this last night. You know, you've made an impact for so many decades. And you don't just play these roles that, you know, they're just roles per se. You're very selective of the roles you play. And every role that you've played, you've made an impact. You can go decade by decade. How has acting first changed, you know, from the 60s and 70s when you started till today?
Well, you're very impressive, you know. I'm just sitting here listening. Gabe's doing it. He's fantastic. Being in Hollywood is interesting to me because when I grew up, I was born in 1938, so when I was a little boy, that was the golden age of Hollywood. And I sure do miss those days and those great people that created this wonderful thing called Hollywood, you know. Hollywood is very dear to me. It means everything. Wonderful, wonderful moments, insights, and, you know, great folks who told wonderful stories. And we've lost a lot of that, you know, over the years for different reasons, you know. Right now we're in a crisis time where the folks of Hollywood have been overtaken, just as our government in many ways has been overtaken, just as the world has been attacked by negative philosophies and stuff. And they really have, being an American, I've seen the slow transition from the patriotism we had in the 50s, let's say, and I grew up in this, and I became an adult in the 60s, and I saw a lot of changing. You know, I experienced that beginning of the attack on our schools, on our, you know, on Hollywood, on the press, on our government. Big deal, you know. So we're suffering with that now. Thank God we have people who have stood up against that, who have exposed it, and who have offered up, you know, themselves, their lives, to change that, to bring God back to the schools, you know, and to give another generation a chance in the United States. So that's the way I look at it right now. You know, now I'm very close to Israel, and Israel is a beacon as well that has been attacked, most recently physically attacked, but all through its years from the beginning, it has had to survive through many challenges. And the Jewish people have this Bible that tells their story, and God calls them His chosen, and sometimes that must become somewhat of a burden to some, you know, the comedians among them. We have great comedians, Jewish comedians, who always say, "We're chosen for what?" You know what I mean? They say different kinds of, there's a lot of jokes about that. But I think they've held on to what they're supposed to be, what they've been told they were. And the Bible is the seminal book of life. It's so important. And I was raised Catholic, and I wasn't always in tune with that Bible and its importance. But over the years, I've paid more attention to it. And right now, it's very, very important, this Bible, because the Bible tells not only the story of what was and how this people came to be and what this land means, but it also tells us what's going to be too. So I believe it, you see. I believe that we're supposed to get past this period and that eventually all people will recognize the importance of Israel and come to worship in Jerusalem. That's all people from all parts of the world. So that's the future, and we have to. This generation has to get them there, get us there. You see, so I think I've been very fortunate to be with people like your family, Gabe, and my dear friends, the Pauls. Stephen Paul has been generates a tremendous amount of energy and has done a whole lot of things with me. One of them being JLTV, Jewish Life Television, and we had on it. He said to me once. He's always thought of me. He says, "You know a lot about the Bible." Well, I don't know that much, but Stephen has really been mostly focused on business. You see. But he's made a great portrait. He's a tremendous man. And he said, "So what should we do? What's the first thing we should do, John, at JLTV?" And I said, "Why don't you tell the story of the land of Israel?" That's what I said. And so we did. We produced a show. He produced a show called The Land of Israel, God's Story. That was Stephen's idea, God's story. And when he says it, when he does the show, he says, "The land of Israel, welcome to the land of Israel, God's story." Like that, he says it like that. And we did the show with a couple of dear friends, Chabad rabbis, and when Stephen got off and said, "The land of Israel, God's story," he said, "No." They stopped him and said, "No." They want him to do it the way he started. "The land of Israel, God's story." Anyway, but the underlying, the underlying passion to tell this story was an important one, I think, just to introduce people to what they might have forgotten. Do you see? Like when people say, "Well, what's the story?" All of this stuff, the distortion that's happening with the so-called Palestinians and those who are on our campuses, can you imagine, crying out from the river to the sea? It's an insanity that has overtaken, but it's been placed there by the media and all sorts of people who want to bring down Israel. And if people only know what that means, what that land means, they'd have a different understanding. So it's a matter of, we have to overcome a tremendous amount of ignorance. Anyway, you just asked me one little question, and I went off on this.
That's the best kind of interview. People want to hear you, not the other way around. But just to unpack a little bit of what you said, and I won't be able to get all of it. But first of all, I wanted to recall an interview you did with Tucker Carlson, who now seems to be going in the opposite direction, but where you shared the story of your, I guess, re-encounter with God when you were kind of life. Everyone thinks life is just a series of successes, but of course, even for people like yourself, they're not. There's ups and downs, and there's valleys in between.
There is?
Yeah. You were in one of them, and you talked about how you were on the floor, and you kind of heard a voice saying, it's supposed to be hard, and you kind of.
You see that you don't throw that away. I have to. I have to tell you this story. So
go for it.
This is Yeah, everything you said was right. I had made a mess of things. I was in a very dark place. I was really feeling sorry for myself, and and angry with myself, and overwhelmed, and wanting so many things to take place, and not being able to fix my life. And I was on the floor of this little house I had, and I said, "It's so difficult," like that. And I heard in my ear, "It's supposed to be difficult." What? I didn't know what happened in a certain sense, but I knew that voice was real, was from a friend, was from someone much smarter than I, who understood everything I was, and who was giving me that's a sobering thing. It's supposed to be difficult. It's not great news, but to me it was everything. It was hope. It was somebody knows who I am and cares. So it was very emotional, of course, but I felt so good. And that night I slept, as they say, like a baby. And when I see babies in carriages, I say, yeah, that's the sleep. That's the sleep we need. But I slept like that, and I woke up the next morning full of energy. And I said, "So, what do you have for me today?" That's what I said, just out loud. And I turned on the radio, and on the radio comes this song: "I'll build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day." Now, this is very emotional. I can't get through the song. Can't even sing it in the joy that I felt. But can you imagine? That's God's humor, and taking this little fellow saying, "I'll build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day." That song happened to come from a movie that it was one of my favorite movies. It's called An American in Paris, and it's a great song. And I memorized that song. I knew that song, but it wasn't sung by Gene Kelly, who was my favorite, actor. But it was a French fellow who was a singer from France. Anyway, so that was the beginning of another journey for me in this life. And so when and it drew me toward my friend Stephen and his family, and the people in your family, So I became very close to the Jewish people. Not that I wasn't. I was very close to the Jewish people all my life. From the beginnings of my life, when my dad was a golf professional at a Jewish country club, and all of his friends were Jewish. And so, and I realized at the age of about 13 or 14 that the reason why my father was so different from his siblings was because he was surrounded by the members of that club, who raised him from the time he was a caddy, encouraged him to be a golf professional, and hired him at a certain point to be their head professional, and which he was till the end of his life. Anyway, so anyway, I've always been very aware of the Jewish people and their energy and the benefits my family directly received from them. And so all my friends have always been Jewish. So
listen, we share a deep belief in God, and it changes the way you approach life and the issues in life. Right. And to tie it together with what you were talking about earlier on sort of the way our society is looking at what's happening in Israel, but also what's happening on college campuses and in our classrooms, even K through 12, there's that huge disconnect. But to tie back to Hollywood, there's always a debate whether Hollywood and what comes out of Hollywood is a reflection of society or vice versa. How do you look at it?
Well, as I look at it in the way I spoke when I said we've been attacked. This came from the outside. They're trying to destroy us. The KGB originally started it. And they're very sophisticated about that, by the way, how they do it, you know. And now it's been taken over by the atheists of our present time, you know. And there's an awful lot going on. Propaganda is the big weapon at this time. We're getting propaganda from the communist world, and we're getting propaganda from the enemies of Israel, and so we're in a battle right now. We're in a very big battle. This is a war of our time, and I don't think that's my thought every day. As what can we do? What further can we do to educate people and to carry on this battle for the truth? And that's it. When I look at the kids, and when I was in the house with your children and the other kids, boy, that was the most wonderful sound in the world, to have all these kids running around so happy and, you know, wandering about without knowing they're safe, and you know, each taking care of each other. You know what I mean? It was just that was heaven to me. So we can get there. We can get there again. There are people who know how to do that, but we have a few, you know, mountains to climb before we get there, I guess.
Well, for us, the honor.
And I think of Israel. I mean, Israel's big, and the people of Israel, those great ones who, you know, who over centuries have come forth, they're there today. The story is still being told, and I think truth will prevail. I know truth will prevail. The first people who ever saw the possibility of peace on earth were the ancient prophets of Israel. They're the only people who saw a time of peace on earth. So I'm working for that.
You're doing a great job. Tell me a little bit about, you know, the movie Reagan just came out. Obviously, you play a big role in that movie, and you know what you're talking about now about the KGB's influence and such. I know that's part of the movie, but just backtracking a little bit. What do you think the significance is of a movie like Reagan coming out now in a time where in Hollywood, pushing any sort of conservative, let alone Republican messages, there's so much pushback against it?
There is, Gabe. There is a tremendous pushback. I have a good regard for all the jobs in Hollywood, and one of the jobs is criticism, the critics, right? But when the critics can be moved around, intimidated enough to take a shot at something that's a perfectly good piece of work, an exceptional piece of work in many ways, and they feel that they have a responsibility to downplay it because they might be looked askance from members of the community and lose their work, lose their jobs because of it. Can you imagine that? You know, that's what's happened. So you see the numbers of the numbers of the people who like this piece. It's like a 98 percentile or something like that, an A rating for different places. And then you see the critics, and they're giving it the lowest ratings possible. So there's a big divergence. The people who go see the film love it, and these critics have had to say, you know, something negative. And the reviews are, if in another world, they would be comic to me because because the guys are writing and they're trying to look sophisticated by writing junk, you know, or whatever, you know, being low level critics, you know, thugs.
I mean, that's the same feeling I get when I read the paper, right?
You say, hey, fellas, who hired you to do this, you know?
Right.
You should get another job because it's going to hurt your soul to keep doing this stuff. But
if you read the paper any morning of the week these days during election season, you feel the same way. People using lots of fancy words to push their agenda and really just in a real dishonest way. Like
I understand that people are in threat of their jobs, losing their jobs. But then you gotta finally live with yourself, guys. Eventually, you have to just say, I've got to do something else then, or I have to fight against the system in some way. I have to stand up. Whatever we have to do. We have to see our little job in the whole grand scheme. Each one of us is important. Each one of us, whatever we do, is meaningful, and we're going to have to live with it. So that's listen. I asked myself questions where I've gone through my life and said, well, I've not done so well here, and I've done so. What am I going to do to make up for that? Can I do this? You know, and I'm trying. And I see bravery. You know, there's so many the heroic occupations like firemen and soldiers and police and stuff like. And I say, well, I have to be brave in whatever I do too. You know.
Yeah, I wish we saw more of that. I feel like the few friends I have in this space, in the Hollywood space, the idea I hear is there's sort of like this subculture, this sort of secret culture of people who are actually conservative that don't believe in all these woke ideologies, but they can't be public about it. They can't dare say that they support President Trump or that they're even just not even a Democrat but moderate. They can't even go that way. It's so aggressive in that space. So hopefully we see more of that. I wanted to jump to something else.
It's so refreshing when somebody turns around and says, "This is nonsense." Yes. Like there's one. I don't want to point to people, but there's in the football world, right? You have people who are taking a knee during the Star Spangled Banner. It's repulsive to me to think that people can go that far. That they're so disturbed that they can't find the truth in the greatness of our country and its principles. But there's a wife of one of the great players who was surrounded by all this woke stuff, and she just said, "Hey, listen, I'm out of this. This is nonsense, and I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to tell the truth." And she just came, and her statement was so refreshing, and it's like a bomb that goes off when the truth is told. You know, it clears the room. It's a wonderful, refreshing thing. It's a blessing. It's from God. You know.
The flip side is it's a little bit sad, right? Because a simple statement like "I'm not with this. This is not this. This doesn't make sense to me." Right? It's such a truth bomb because it's
I don't care who knows it.
Right.
Listen, you know, I don't care who knows it. I'm not going to lie. It's nonsense. It's great, just to get it out there. So,
yeah, we definitely need more of that, and that's why, by the way, I love these kind of platforms. I mean, you say whatever you want, whenever you want it, but we get people in here sometimes. When you have a regular conversation, people sort of shed a little bit of their canned talking points, and you can get into what they really think, and we definitely need more of that.
Don't we need people to be able to express this idea of freedom of speech? A big deal. It's so important to find out what people really think. It's important. What else you got but the truth about yourself? You know what I'm saying? This is what I really feel. You got to be able to talk honestly with it. Otherwise, the conversations are nonsense. So anyway, I'm hoping people start waking up. It's almost like the clock is ticking. Are you going to be honest? Are you going to, step up and protect your families and your children, and do the right thing and change the course of events here? You can be you can be a hero. You know what I mean? The simple people who just tell the truth right now are really deeply needed. They're the reason things will change.
Yeah, I also suffer from being an optimist, and I think that we've gone too far as a society. I think people are going to start seeing it. Every time I say that, I have friends that push back, but I just am. I'm an optimist. I think good prevails, and as long as we keep pushing back and we're honest and we're open and keeps shining lights on the darkness, that we can prevail.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And there is God, you know. We don't, it was an interesting thing about our country. In the convention for the Constitution, when they're trying to figure out how to make the decisions to run this country that they've now fought for and finally achieved, now they have these great geniuses in this room, and they're there for 4 weeks, and they did nothing but complain about local things that they wanted to put in and make everybody, whatever, and these are geniuses too. Most of the room are really high intelligence, you know. And finally, Ben Franklin stood up and said, you know, we've been doing this for 4 weeks, and we seem to find a way to bring our egos into it and find a way to clash instead of listening to each other and whatever it is. He said, you know, during the war, when we were all in great danger, we said prayers to God. Those prayers were heard, and the response gave us the victory for this country. Do you think that maybe we're not paying attention to that light, that voice, now that we've finished the war? We must sue for wisdom at this time so that we can achieve what we have to achieve. It has to be in God's light. It's too bad that I have this emotional thing when I get to the truth of something, where something moves me, you know. It's that's really, when I think of that, I think of, that's who our country became. That's who the founding fathers were. They gave us this through God's wisdom, and it's been attacked. All those truths, all those principles have been attacked, and now we have to recapture them, and God is going to help us. That's the only way we can accomplish it. So anybody who's a little wishy-washy about God is in trouble, I'm telling you. There's no answers there. God is real. And the Bible is filled with the drama of life, of human life, but always with the guidance of this force of truth and good and kindness. Long-suffering. God is long-suffering in many ways. And the journey of the Jewish people is a big lesson for all human beings. It's the human lesson. And he said, and God said, they have not been able to take my words and put them into action, the words I've given Moses and Joshua. And they've had their heroes, but they're going to turn their backs on me. And therefore, I'm going to take them away from this land, and horrors are going to take place, and I'm going to spread them across the world. Now, can you imagine this? That God said this through the prophets, through Moses. Right? When he delivered them to the land, he said this. You're not going to be able to hold on to it. So did Joshua in his last days say it. And all of the prophets. And yet the Jewish people didn't listen. And they were taken from the land. And they were told, and God said, and Moses said, you know, there'll be a time where they come back to the land. And they will be my people. And then we will do what's necessary to be done. And all people will come to Jerusalem to pray, to stay in proper behavior all across the world. So this is our future. This is what we're going for. When I think of that, when I grew up at a time when the Jewish people came back to Israel. This is a big moment in time. And I wish that all people would clean out all of the attacks on on this Jewish state and get to the truth of it and know the answer for what happened in 1917 when the Ottoman Empire was disbanded and when Balfour, Lord Balfour, the British former Prime Minister, said it should be given, this land of Palestine should be given as the historic land of the Jewish people, should be given back to the Jewish people, who are in various countries throughout the world and are always attacked. They need a homeland for safety. And that's exactly what happened when the victors came together. They determined this huge land mass of the Ottoman Empire, and they carved it up into over 20 Arab states and one Jewish state in Palestine. And that's this Palestine is a land, it comes from the Philistines, whatever it is, it was Israel. It was Israel, the Israel of David. That's what it was. And it's happened in our lifetimes. And it's like 80 years ago, this all came to be. They were offered finally through the United Nations, which has always been kind of anti-Semitic, always, that they were given a portion of the land that they were supposed to be getting from the League of Nations. So there's an illegal aspect to it initially, right? And then they were given this portion. They said, we'll take it. Well, at least we'll have something. And that's how this started. But there was, from the beginning of that time, always this cancer put into the land to bring it down. From the Arab world, the 5 Arab nations or 5, surrounding areas that attacked the Jewish state the day it was given birth by the United Nations. And no nation stood by their side, came to their aid. America didn't come to their aid. I don't understand that. Do you know that it was an illegal, unprovoked war against this Jewish state at its inception, right? And amazingly, miraculously, one might say, they were the victors in that war. And they won back more of the land that they were originally promised. Anyway, but from that time, there's been this, they took people who were on the Arab culture, who came there so recently. The reason why those people were there, and this is to attack the lie, really, the lie that they were colonialists and they took somebody else's land. This was barren land. In 1850, there was no one living there. No one. Just an occasional, nomad or whatever. There was nobody there. And then the Jewish people started buying land from absentee landlords. And then this promise came that they were going to make a state. The rumor started to happen. And the Jewish people started building there, started coming there and building houses and trying to fight malaria and build ways to get water into this area that was mostly rock and rubble. And then these people from the surrounding areas came for work. That's where they came from. This wasn't the country that came there. This wasn't people from from this area. Anyway, that's how this group came to be. That's how these so-called Palestinians came to be. They came there for work initially and became part of the community as this nation was going to be built. And the British, who had the responsibility for bringing the Jews into this area, defaulted on that because they fell under the influence of the oil-rich Arab world, you know. So there was a lot of stuff going on. I say this because I have an opportunity. I have a camera, you know, I have an opportunity to say a few things. So might as well say a few truths so people can start hooking onto the truth, going to look at it and question themselves about what they're doing and what the people who are governing them are doing. So anyway, that's a passion for me, and I don't know exactly why it was me that in some way has this passion more than most people. I don't know what it is, but I've got to say that it is a passion out of love, and love for the truth, and that's why I love the Jewish story. I love it. I think it's an amazing story. So when Abraham was initially told that, you know, I'm going to take you from your father's land, I'm going to show you a land that I will give to you, and he said, I'll make you a great nation, and you will be a blessing to all the families of the earth. That's what you are. That's what you are, Abraham. That's what your people are. That's what this land is. And that's what it still is. It's a blessing.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I clearly share that passion with you, and the same emotion when we talk about these important things, especially in this critical time. I mean, most Jewish families around the world, but so many around the world today with the threats on the current day state of Israel, we all share that sort of both a sense of emotion from the past, but also concern for the future. Right. So that's really, these days, these conversations take on even a deeper level of emotion. But I was thinking as you were sharing the story, there's so many times I wanted to interject, but I needed to let you tell that story.
You probably should have.
No, it's okay.
You should have stopped me.
No, never.
Stop, John. Stop.
Is that you know, people will hear this and they'll hear you talk about, you say God is real, and you talk about the story of Israel and the story about the ingathering of the exiles, which is literally laid out in the Bible and the Torah and the Old Testament, whichever name we want to use for it. And it's actually happening today. But people will hear that and say, oh, this guy's crazy. He's like pushing Bible stuff and God, right? It's the opposite. It's really? the opposite, despite the fact, I mean, don't worry, they do it to me all day. I wear a kippah, so I get that often. And I only started doing that a few years ago. But these days, just telling the truth, just pushing that out is so important. The only fact I wanted to add to your the history that you laid out that people should hear if they're listening to this for the first time is that even the name Palestine for the land was the first real dagger that was put into the story, and that was put in by the Romans, who renamed the land Palestine after the Philistines, which was a Greek people who were enemies of the Israelites, of the Jewish people of the time, and they wanted to wipe out the Jewish background and connection to the land. And whoever would have thought at that time that then in 1964, which is when the PLO was established, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that's the first time that the Arabs that were living in the region took on the identity as Palestinians. Before that, Palestinians was actually the Jews. It would be Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Arabs. It wasn't a nationality at any times or even a national identity. But I do want to ask you, because I know you have an important...
Well said.
An important lunch to go.
You see, I'm not sitting with, this is not, you know...
I told you.
The real thing.
This is what we do. This is our lives. It's not what we do. It's our lives. You know, recently there was a pretty high profile attack on one of the most influential Jewish figures in the last century, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the attack was, you know, he's a radical and all these negative things. I don't want to even ascribe it to the person who made it, because she doesn't deserve more airtime than she's getting on it. But I do know that you've been very connected actually to the Chabad movement, which is the movement that this rabbi, this Rebbe established, or his father-in-law did. And in fact, you spoke to him once. So if you wanted, would you feel comfortable sharing what that interaction was like and what you know about the Rebbe?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the Chabad because you brought it up. The Chabad is a very interesting group. Very interesting. Where does it come from? The origins go back to a fellow by the name of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is, that means the master of the good name, right? The master of the good name. These profound poetic expressions are throughout the history of the Jewish people. But anyway, in a very dark time in Europe, in Eastern Europe, this fellow came forward. And there was a Jewish presence there, and there were very sincere, you know, and noble fellows. And they thought this fellow, the Baal Shem Tov, was a young man, and he was teaching little kids. And they thought he may have been addled a little bit, you see. And then some years went by, and they realized that there's something about him. And then they started questioning him, and he started coming up with biblical verses. And, you know, he seemed to know everything. And then they realized, oh my gosh, this guy's from God. This is a really high, holy man. And he built an army of people around him who just were followers of his. And he gave them the encouragement to go and teach and have their own groups, do you see? So he had many disciples at a certain point, and those disciples became the Hasidim. And there are many great people. Almost every generation has a genius at the center of it, you know, guiding their way. And they have wonderful stories of miracles, and always stories of fun too. And the Baal Shem Tov has nothing in writing left. All we have from the Baal Shem Tov are songs. These little songs that he said, he's taught them dancing and singing and life and, you know, l'chaim, you know what I mean? This was the essence of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching. He was intellectually superior to everybody at that time, but he had a way. He said, "Joy. This is what God wishes for us: is joy." And so anyway, he became very famous, and then miracles happened around him. Lots of miracles. He would tell people, you know, you have to go to Minsk or something like that, you know, and you're going to find someone there. There's somebody saying, I can't find a husband, and so well, go to Minsk and just have whatever. And they say, you're going to have 3 children, whatever. Things like that, magical, lovely things. And anyway, so that's this Chabad group that's today represents everything I heard about the Baal Shem. It's alive today with the Chabad. If you see the Chabad characters, the least of them does more than anybody else you can imagine. You know, they're worker bees. They just go and they do, and they have big families, and they do all the things that the Bible and the teachings of God about family, they do that. They live by the letter of the law, you see. And it's great. And so I at one point, somebody said, I wanted to do something for the Native American people, or the Hopi people, who were holy people. In the Native tradition across this country, there's someone called the Holy Elders. There is a holy elder in every tribe. And the people all know who the holy elders are. And I've met many of them, and they're real. So they're just exactly what you expect. And if I had to say, well, what are they like? I say, well, you know, a nice Jewish person who you think is a loving person and wise, that's what they're like. And I knew one of them by the name of Thomas Ben Yaka, who was just a great guy. And he was one of the representatives of the Hopi prophecy, mysterious guy. And he was a lovely man, just a wonderful man. And I wanted to get him to talk about the Hopi prophecy and to welcome, invite people to the land to talk to. They have somebody who is like the Pope there. Nobody knows who he is on the outside, but the people know. Some people know who he is. This is mysterious religious thing, you know. Anyway, so I wanted to do something. So I asked my friend, I had a friend, Hank Paul, who was Stephen's father. So Stephen Paul, my partner in many things, is his father. Great guy. Great guy. A chapter should be written on him for sure. I mean, I should take the time to tell you what kind of a guy he was. What an unusual guy he was. He never without a smile, never would say anything negative, never. And if you asked him for advice, he'd give you always wise advice, but it was always with humor, always with a smile. That was great anyway, great guy. So I said, I want to have a press conference for this Hopi people, this great man. And I want a kind of a spiritual background for it, you know. So, and I was looking around, I went to different places to see if maybe a Buddhist place, maybe this or that, some kind of a spiritual background because these people were spiritual. So I said to my friend Hank, I said, Hank, I'm looking for, I can't find one. He says, well, let me, here's a number. You should call this fellow. He said, his name is Jerry Cutler. He's a rabbi. He said, maybe he can help you. And he'd talk to Jerry. And so I call him up. I said, Jerry, this is John Voight, and I'm looking for, I want to do a little press conference for this Hopi fellow. And I have some very good people like Tyne Daly and Elizabeth Taylor and wonderful people who were going to come and give focus to this. You know. And he said, John, I'll give you Temple Bethel. He says, and I'll throw in the coffee in Danish as well. You got a deal, I said. So we have the press conference, and at the end of it, I say to him, Jerry, I said, now I'm so grateful to you. I said, now I owe you, you know, so if there's anything you need ever, you know, you just let me know and I'll see if I can come through. He said, well, as a matter of fact, he says, I write the script for the Chabad telethon. And it would be wonderful if you would come by and just, you know, say a word or two, because they're great people, and it would, you know, be wonderful to have somebody from the Hollywood community. I said, let me check them out, and if it's as you say, I'll definitely do it. So that's how it started with me, with the Chabad. And I was with Stephen's father and mother, of course, my friends. So and I would say always to Stephen's mother, I said, do you think I should do this? And Dorothy would always say, yeah, it's a good thing to do. She would tell me, you know, she was my mentor, really. She would always, you know, the mother always knows everything, you know. So I go on the telethon, and I didn't know, I was a little nervous, I didn't know what to say, and I had a few little words that I picked out to say. And then I say them, I said, these people are terrific people, every dollar goes to somebody to help somebody out, that's what, so just if you can put a few bucks together, it couldn't be better used, or whatever, I said. And then they said, and then I hear, and now the tote. I go, what? And then they said, the tote. We're 2,146,046 or whatever it is. And then they start dancing, and the rabbis grab me and pull me into the thing, and then we're dancing. Holy smokes. And I'm dancing with the rabbi, Shlomo Kunin, who was this bear of a man at that time. And just, I started laughing. I was laughing the whole time. These people, you know, they were just a lot of fun. They were just, and then I knew what it was all about, you know, this whole thing about the Baal Shem I found out later and all of that. But anyway, they were wonderful, wonderful people. And and always full of laughter. Do you see? They tell you a story, and then they start singing, and then they dance. It's fantastic. Anyway, so I've had a lot of fun with these people, and I've done a lot of good things because of it. I'm able to help a lot of people, and they're not people who have money. They don't have a lot of money. They depend on the charity of others, and thank God there are enough people around who have kept them going. So, and they send these emissaries out there now, 5,000 Chabad places across the world, and they're a tremendous example of many things. So I'm very happy to have been involved with some of their history, and very, very proud of my association with them now.
So you may have done it unwittingly, but you actually did my favorite thing to do right now in these times when anti-Semitism is so rampant. When we always want to respond, and we should respond to anti-Semitism directly, but we can't forget about the positive impacts of the Jewish community around the world and philo-Semitism, right? As they say, positive things, and not always having to address the negative, but here's the positive. If someone said something negative about someone and you spent a few minutes talking about all the positives about them, that's the best way to respond to that.
Good.
So I just wanted to thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do. I hope that I succeeded in giving everyone a glimpse of what I know, which is what an incredible guy you are, and how you use your platform for so many great things. Not just having the skills as an incredible actor you've had for so many decades, and we've all watched that and the impact it has on every generation in the last 60 years or so, and in the future, but also what you add to the world with all of your activism and all of your truth telling that you do, because you share your gift to tell the stories that I dream to tell, but the way you tell them it really pierces the heart and the mind. So I hope many people get to listen to you here and everywhere else. Thank you so much for your time, John.
Great, Gabe. God bless. And listen, I just want to say one thing about all the suffering of the people in Israel. This is a bad time for so many people, And yet, we have to say God is watching over us. We don't know the answers, but we know that sometimes, when we see these tragedies, we feel that it's the ending, of our, but it isn't. And for those who have sacrificed, these martyrs who have paid with so much pain and so much difficulty, they are being lifted up into the heavenly realms in a very special place, I believe.
Thank you. With that, we will see you next time on the next episode of Standpoint.
Wow. Every time I'm with you, I love you even more. You're such a special man.